is the quality of evil that is threatening the world as we speak, and is putting the world on the verge of a nuclear war. And this quality of evil has come to a kind of point of potential defeat. And the sickness that possesses individuals of the type such as Dick Cheney, for instance, or Barack Obama or Tony Blair, as examples, is a sickness derived from an oligarchy to which they have attached themselves, and have attached themselves in a very perverse and degenerate way. And the center of this evil is the transatlantic, was primarily the European oligarchy. And the center of that is the British monarchy, the institution of the British monarchy. Now, the core center of that evil, both currently and historically, is centered on the idea of human property. Slavery, chattel, peonage, serfdom, slave labor, work camps in some cases, and the denial of the sacred creative quality of potential that exists in all human beings. The denial of it. And if you live in a society which tolerates this kind of inhuman treatment of mankind, then you yourself develop certain psychological problems as well as a result of that. And now that system of human property was best exemplified by Rome, the Roman Empire. It also emerged with the rise of Venice, Amsterdam, and London, which are the modern mercantile forms of that system of property, financial, maritime. And this system of property was also the Confederacy, the slave system. But the slave system didn't just exist into the middle of the 1800s in the United States. It existed in Brazil, it existed in Cuba, it existed in a different form in India. And but this system of property today also exists in Saudi Arabia, with the monarchy basically owning the entire population. Now, the whole problem here is that if you deny this sacred quality of creative potential in the human being, then you lose your own humanity, and then you begin to classify people according to caste or class or master-slave relations. And the United States history is shaped by a fight against this. You had the emergence of a movement against this in Alexander Hamilton, in Benjamin Franklin, in some of the founding fathers of the United States. But then you had a movement to perpetuate and expand that system of slavery in another group of founding fathers and their continuators, in Jefferson, Monroe, Madison, in the creation of the slaveocracy of the Confederacy. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up now is because that battle against slavery and the battle of those who have a commitment to an anti-human view, a property view of man, never ended with the defeat of the Confederacy. Lincoln's defeat of the Confederacy, however, did not end that war. And that war is now going on inside the United States, as it is going on in the rest of the world. Now, so there's a problem because most people think that the slave mentality was defeated by Lincoln, but it continued on. And so I'm going to make a digression now into the role of a very little known character who was very important. His name was Ulysses S. Grant, who historians have relegated to a very, basically they consider him to be a relatively dumb, nice guy who was a good general, but a lousy president, corrupt, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But he was the pillar of the fight against slavery after Lincoln's assassination. And after Lincoln's assassination, a pro-slavery vice president that Lincoln had put on as vice president to try to win the 1864 election, his name was Andrew Johnson, became the president, and he was for the revival of slavery. And there was a war between Ulysses S. Grant, who was the commander of the army and the commander of the armies that occupied the South during this period, and Johnson. At one point, Johnson was almost impeached. At another point, Johnson almost pulled a coup against Grant. And this was a battle. And what was going on in the South was the former slaveholders and the former Confederate officers and soldiers were organizing lynch mobs to terrorize and keep power. And the federal army had to come in to guarantee the rights, and I mean brutal. They would go in and kill hundreds of blacks who had come to vote, or they'd kill hundreds of people and it was bloody, and the military was determined under Grant to make sure that the rights of everyone were observed. And at the same time, there was a massive push for public education of the freed slaves, freedmen slaves. And it was fought. It was a fight. And Grant was committed to that fight, no matter what. And I can email you the relevant article, which is quite spectacular, because this is not the way Grant is perceived by historians. He fought it tooth and nail, affirming the idea of, and I'm going to quote you here. I'm going to quote this quote here. He said, "The spirit of hatred and violence is stronger than law. Lieutenant General Sheridan was requested by me to go to Louisiana to observe and report. No party motives nor prejudice can reasonably be imparted to him." You know, Johnson had tried to remove Sheridan, who was the military governor of Louisiana. And And yeah, I can't find the exact quote that I want. And he also tried to end the wars of extermination against the Indians. Because from his point of view, the issue of slavery, the acceptance of slaves, was the most corrupting thing that had to be dealt with. While the Civil War did not begin with the intention of eradicating slavery, the necessity to eradicate slavery was absolutely the bottom line for the future of mankind, for there to be a future for the human race. And this is what Grant represented. Then he became president. And again, 8 years of fighting against the interests in the North and the interests in the South that wanted to cave in to the Southern slave interest. And eventually, it was not resolved. He wanted the military dictatorship over the South to remain another 10 years. But in 1876, and there was a deal made after he left office. There was a constitutional crisis. There was a deal made. I won't go into all the details, but the military rule was ended in 1877, and that was never resolved. That issue was never resolved, and it's still not resolved to this day, fundamentally. And in spite of the civil rights movement. Now, why is this so important? Because the United States, because of this tradition, which continued on in the 20s, it continued on in the Federal Bureau of Investigation, it continued on in the Scottish Rite of Freemasons, it continued on with Woodrow Wilson, who helped sponsor the second birth of the Klan. It continued on in Harry S. Truman, who was a Confederate-minded pig, who launched the Cold War, who launched the use of atomic weapons on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, who was a tool of the British. Roosevelt had no intention of allowing the imperial colonial powers to have power to go back to the system that they had. Roosevelt was willing to work with Stalin on the condition that Stalin supported the ending of a system of colonialism and the creation of actual sovereign nations based on economic development. That was Roosevelt, but Roosevelt didn't live, and a Confederate pig took over. Literally, a Confederately minded person, very shallow, very narrow, took over and unnecessarily used nuclear weapons, which were used to launch the Cold War. And under the guise of the Cold War, under the guise of fighting communism, neo-colonial policies remained intact under the excuse of fighting communism, just as neo-colonial policies today are being attempted to be maintained under the justification of fighting terrorism. The same thing. The same mentality. This is, from the U.S. standpoint, this is a Confederate mindset. This is J. Edgar Hoover of the FBI. This is the massive corruption of U.S. politics by organized crime, which was protected by J. Edgar Hoover. And you see that today in the fact that J. Edgar Hoover's top closest associate, who was involved very closely with him in all the operations that J. Edgar Hoover was involved with, was a mob lawyer by the name of Roy Cohn, who was also the lead lawyer for McCarthy in the McCarthy period. Roy Cohn's protege is Donald Trump. Today, Donald Trump is a continuation of Roy Cohn, the organized criminal apparatus that collaborated with, worked with, was part of the network of J. Edgar Hoover. That is also, in a sense, the Confederacy, because the two guys who have their remains in the 16th Avenue Masonic Temple in Washington, D.C. One is Albert Pike, the other is J. Edgar Hoover. Now, let me bring this into the current situation. What do we? We have, under a system of neocolonialism, neoliberalism, financial imperialism, we have a system that depredated developing countries and sought to keep those countries enslaved to debts, enslaved to a financial system, not allow them to develop, but may use their poverty as a source of a form of slave labor and not have development. And it's the same mindset. Instead of developing these nations and developing even more so yourself in the process of developing those nations, which was Kennedy's concept, which was Eisenhower's concept, which was also FDR's concept. The world went, after Kennedy's assassination, the world went into this new form of slavery, using the International Monetary Fund, which was reorganized after the takedown of the Bretton Woods system in '71, using the World Bank, using the international banking system, using the World Trade Organization, using every kind of a mechanism to prevent development, but increase the lowering the wages and lowering the living standards. Now, so now we have come to a point where that system, which allegedly now supposedly runs the world, I mean, the Soviet system did collapse, is now at the end of its existence. And the deep psychological issue is, how can you, here in Canada or in the United States, who have been a part of, since the assassination of Kennedy, since the takedown of the Bretton Woods system in '71, you've been a party to this depredation, which has been going on. All these people know that they've been a party to these depredations instinctively. They may not understand it. And most people, the good people I'm talking about, they are not psychologically able, because of this, because they've been a party to it, to wage a war against it. And you have China, Russia, India, and many other nations forming the BRICS, and they are not capitulating to it. Their leadership is fighting to develop. And those in the United States and Canada who should be supporting this effort, because it also means the freedom of Canadians and Americans to develop, find themselves in a very awkward psychological crisis. Because if China and later India emerge as the world's major economic powers, does that not make us now their slaves? Because the way you think about it, who's on top and who's not on top, defines that now, if you're not going to be on top, what does that mean? And if this is your identity, then yes, you must go to war to crush the enemy. And who is the enemy? The enemy is Russia, China, India, all the countries that want to develop. Why are they the enemy? Because they want to develop. And why is that the enemy? Because they might develop more than us, and thereby they might be better than us, and thereby they might have more than we do, and therefore they might be more powerful, and thereby we are their subjects. That is the mindset that is deeply ingrained inside the United States among the ignorant population that doesn't know, especially I wouldn't say ignorant population, the population that doesn't understand or has lost a sense of what America really was in the tradition of Grant or Lincoln or Kennedy. They don't understand this. It's them or us. So this is the problem we have in the United States. But then on top of that, there are people who do understand this. They may not be many, but they are in important positions in the United States. So we have this incredible situation, and I would imagine that it's something similar in Canada. Now, so this question of identity and the Confederacy is very important, because that part of the United States that cannot accept the idea of India and China becoming industrial powers on this planet is the same mentality as the Confederacy. And you find this greatest in the southern part of the United States. That's where you find this mentality. No, they are not going to be our masters, because the mind can't conceive of anything other than a master-slave relationship. Geopolitically, either we're on top or we're on the bottom. We're America. This mindset is what is a very important part of the geopolitical strategic situation. But then the history of a fight against slavery in the United States, which the LaRouche movement in the United States represents in the most intellectually developed expression, is also has very significant support as well in other parts of the nation. And this is coming to a head right now in the political process inside the United States. So on the one hand, you have a global systemic breakdown of the transatlantic financial system. On the other hand, you have the emergence of a new system of development around the BRICS nations. And then you have this internal cauldron, political cauldron, developing within the most militarily powerful country, the United States. And a war does exist right now between this British extended financial empire, which is also an empire of sentiment, against the former WOGs or colonials or whatever. That empire is at war with Russia right now. It's at war with using the financial warfare, using sanctions, color revolutions, and it's an intensifying war. Now, the anti-imperial residue in the US exists. That anti-imperial residue continued in part, believe it or not, with Ronald Reagan to some degree, with Clinton, Bill Clinton, and Lyndon LaRouche, who was brought in the late 70s into a nexus of policy orientations of the anti-imperial orientation within the United States, which has elements in the military and the intelligence community and in policymaking. They were, to some degree, reconstituted after the disastrous Carter administration and the previously disastrous Nixon administration. They were reconstituted around LaRouche, around elements around Ronald Reagan, who they tried to assassinate, who they almost assassinated, and also around Clinton. And these, while they were not powerful, they were nonetheless represented in anti-imperial orientation. That anti-imperial orientation was crushed in the Monica Lewinsky affair, where Bill Clinton was crushed. And since the Monica Lewinsky affair, following the Bush election and then the Obama election, the pro-imperial forces aligned with the British monarchy have been the dominant force inside the United States, with rearguard actions against them being run by the anti-imperial forces. Now, we come into this election. And what we have is the following situation. Okay. You have in Great Britain and in the United States a motion centered in the trade unions, centered in the firemen, the policemen's unions, the working element of the society. They have in England and Great Britain, they are now going into a total rebellion against Blair and the New Labour. Margaret Thatcher's greatest contribution, she said, was New Labour. Anyhow, and you have the emergence of the most likely new Labour Party leader, who is a staunch opponent of the City of London, of imperialism, Jeremy Corbyn. It looks like he will take the Labour leadership of the Labour Party and will go to war with he'll go for Glass-Steagall. He'll go for the breakup of the banks. This guy, but that represents a process that is also in a lesser, more convoluted, well, in a more convoluted form, is also going on in the United States, where the entire trade union movement of the United States went against Obama, went against the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and is fighting for Glass-Steagall. So you should know that it was the LaRouche movement that began the campaign for Glass-Steagall in the United States in 2008. And the Glass-Steagall campaign is the campaign to break the power of the transatlantic financial system and to protect the commercial banking system. That ends the power, the reinstatement of Glass-Steagall, of this financial system. So essentially, you have this development in the United States. You have the BRICS. And you have 4 of the 5 presidential candidates, that's Sanders, O'Malley, Chafee, and Webb. They are all pro Glass-Steagall. And now finally, the Senate minority leader, Harry Reid, who did everything possible to stop Glass-Steagall, has now come out in favor of the idea of Glass-Steagall. He didn't quite say it, but he's come out in favor of it. So there's a real shift going on against the international banking crowd in the US. Now, Hillary Clinton, who is not a bad person, and who's not a Confederately minded person. She is not a person for the empire as such. She was told by LaRouche and many others, including her own husband, not to become part of the Obama administration, but to remain in the Senate. She went in and she was step by step terrorized and broken to the point that she actually covered up for Obama on Benghazi. Now, why is this very crucial? Because around Hillary Clinton, around the Clintons, are that layer, which while they're not anti-imperial, they are squishy on Wall Street. And they have to break with Wall Street. And this layer is in a crisis because the power that behind Obama is also the power behind the Bush family. And these people, they're not just going to want to win the presidency. They want to kill China. They want to kill India. They want to kill Russia. They want to rape and plunder and destroy most of humanity as a victory for their as victory for the empire, basically. And they are dangerous. They are evil. They help to create the various terrorist movements that you are familiar with. They kill people in their own administration. Obama's had many people killed. Obama had the ambassador to Libya killed. These are killers. The Bush family are killers. Obama is a killer, and the people around him are psychotic about this. They have a mindset that is absolutely anti-human. And it's either we win or we would rather not have a world. And that is what you're dealing with. Now, their plan is to crush Hillary Clinton, and with her, crush her so bad that they destroy whatever possible formation can emerge. Take down, with her being crushed, take down whatever possible resistance or formation might occur within the Democratic circles and also within Republican circles. So they have her set up to go to prison on charges that she, in October, that she broke the security laws with respect to her internet server. Now, we are telling Hillary, who is living under a reign of terror, fear for her life, fear for her kids' lives, fear for her close associates' lives, go public. Tell the truth about Benghazi. Bring Obama down. Bring him down. That is the safest course for you, and that is the best course for his country. Give up your ambition for being president, because you cannot become president under any circumstances. And that's what we are asking Hillary to do directly. And we are putting this on to all of her entourage, all of the networks around her. She has to do this. And she might, because it is the only way that she could probably save herself from being completely destroyed. Okay, now the financial situation is really getting worse. You have the Greek situation, and that is being Greece is being massively brutalized, but it's not a solution, because there's no way Greece can accommodate the demands of the financial system. It's just you're brutally crushing somebody, but it's not going to succeed in dealing with the financial crisis. So you're getting a certain instability in the financial system, and you're also getting financial warfare directed against Russia and China. Oh, I should mention that the Obama administration, the Obama people, are collaborating with the Bush crowd directly on everything. There is collaboration between Obama and the Bush family, between the Obama grouping and the Bush family. Now, the situation is the following. We have, in the United States, we have people I call Dr. Strangeloves, and these are the number crunchers who think you can win a nuclear war if you do this and do that and everything else like that. So what they have done is they've been promoting, since Bush came into office in 2001, they've been promoting the ABMs. They got out of the ABM treaty, and they've been promoting an ABM system to be able to stop a second strike and have a first strike advantage. And they've been transforming NATO Right now in Ukraine, the current government of Poroshenko is not effective in the war against Russia. So right now, the Obama administration, Victoria Nuland, are preparing the right sector to do a coup against Poroshenko, the right sector itself. And they're bringing in the money and the arms and everything for the right sector to go the next phase. This is going to massively destabilize the situation because these people are crazy. They kill people just because you didn't look at them right. I mean, this is really, this is going to destabilize Europe even further. The same thing in Somalia. The Saudis are doing this thing, a massive destruction of the poorest country in the Arab world. And who's coming out on top? The Saudis? No. Who's growing as a result of what the Saudis are doing? ISIS. ISIS is building a base now in Yemen because of all of this. Was this intentional on the part of the Saudis and the United States, which is backing the Saudis? Now, let's go to Turkey. Erdogan's did not get a majority. His party did not get a majority in the last elections, and they've been in the negotiations to form a coalition government, and the negotiations have permanently broken down. Erdogan has worked out a deal with Obama. The deal is this. We'll set up this so-called no-fly zone for the rebels, the anti-Syrian government rebels, but they don't exist. The anti-Syrian rebels, our rebels, they don't exist. They don't really exist. But we're going to set up a no-fly zone to protect them. And now we have the U.S. has the right to engage any opposition to the so-called rebels that don't exist. Syrian government, the Kurds. Do the Kurds know the difference between the so-called moderate Syrian rebels and and so forth? Okay, so essentially, this was done without support of the Congress. This was done during the recess of the U.S. Congress. Then Erdogan sparking a war with the Kurds, and he tends to use that war to get his party in with a full majority, now that there's going to be new elections. Who's going to grow as a result? ISIS. Was that intended? Well, there was an interview at Al Jazeera by the former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, responsible for military intelligence. His name is Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. He was asked by the interviewer if this was a mistaken policy. He said, no, that's not what I said. It was intentional. It's an intentional policy. So the head of the DIA, former head of the DIA, is saying that the policy of allowing ISIS to grow is intentional, was intentional, or helping ISIS grow. Now, he put forward a report prior to September 11, 2012, the Benghazi event, where he was saying that the arms that were going to Syria would in effect, from Libya to Syria, would in effect end up with a caliphate of terrorism on a global scale. The head of the Defense Intelligence Agency was circulating that report in the administration. And on the day of September 11, 2012, he was circulating a report precisely explaining what was actually going on. And those reports were released under freedom of information, not by the court, not by the Congress. Why? Because there were people in his government and there were hangers-on in his defense intelligence agencies that used the freedom of information to release those reports. And those reports are out there. Okay, so now, this is what Obama's doing. Now the Ukrainian situation and the Syrian situation and other situations, the ABM situation, is now coming to a point of direct confrontation with Russia. And if Russia doesn't back down, do you have a limited war? Do you have a slightly more limited war, less than limited war, or do you have nuclear war? And that's the direction Obama's going. And he's going now because the system is in a crisis. And the head of the Duma, the Speaker of the Duma, Narishkin, has said that it was the financial crisis which is driving the war crisis. So now, how do you deal with this? Okay, now, what we're trying to do in the United States and globally with respect to the United States is, as Obama escalates, the cabinet is prepared to use the 25th Amendment to remove him from office before it goes to a nuclear war. That's what we're trying to do, is set that up. Hillary could play a very key role in helping in that respect, and breaking Obama and thereby preventing his capacity to take it to nuclear war. But you cannot stop the process that is now going on in the global. The BRICS are for real. They're going with the development. You cannot stop that without going to war with them. Financial warfare against them will not do. International terrorism will probably not do it either, because they know the game. You're going to have to go to war with them. So that's where we are. So we're preparing in the crisis to have, if Obama accelerates, which he will, to have him removed under the 25th Amendment. And Richard Nixon was told that he had a 25th Amendment choice if he didn't go along, that the cabinet would remove him on the 25th Amendment if he didn't resign. He was actually told that. So it was, you know, it was something that was in play during the Nixon administration.
What are the conditions of the 25th Amendment specifically? Does it does it allow special does it,
if the cabinet deems, not just the vice president, but if the cabinet deems that the president is mentally or has gone crazy or has been shot and can't function, or they can remove the president. And this was a law that was passed. Actually, it was an amendment that was passed because of the Kennedy situation. You know, what happens when you have an incapacitated president? What are the procedures? So this is an amendment to the U.S. Constitution. It came into being in the late 60s. And this amendment was used to threaten Nixon. Now, you have to understand that people in the government, people in the administration, those who are not completely loyal toadies to Obama, those who are not completely psychotic like his wife and and Susan Rice and Samantha Powers, those people know that this guy has people killed. They know what he is. They know how nothing he says is got any truth to it or has any intention of being truthful behind it. They know this. And people are worried that this is the fool, a completely narcissistic fool that could go for it, that could go for a war with Russia, and actually a war that would lead to nuclear war. That he's that nuts. And if he is that nuts, well, if he's perceived to be that nuts at the right moment, he can be removed by the 25th Amendment. And we want to make sure that that happens at that point, if not earlier. And that's our intention. But the world is shifting. The populations of Europe and even the United States are shifting away from the belief in the financial system, away from the belief in the magic of the marketplace, away from the belief in that the powers of government have to be used to reorganize the banks, to protect the people. There's that kind of process going on. But it is, in the US, is being drowned out by the clown shows of like the Republican debate, by issues like this grouping that is now surfacing to disrupt the presidential process by the name of Black Lives Matter, saying that that economy is not the issue, race is the issue. Well, yeah, race is the issue. Race is the issue that justifies economic depredations. But it's not just race; it's deeper. And so, but this is an operation being funded by Soros, George Soros. He's in there. He's always in there doing this sort of stuff, disrupting the political process. And then you have the Trump disruption, which, you know, he's got a lot of support from the idiots, and he's a Pied Piper for the idiots. You know, he's the Pied Piper taking the idiots off the cliff.
You're not saying anything too harsh about him.
Yeah.
Even the other so-called
candidates. And so this is the situation. So I'm going to stop there and open it up for questions. Go ahead.
Paul, you were saying that the organization is saying that Hillary Clinton can change the thing by coming clean on Benghazi. But is it really necessary, or are we dependent on her? Because everybody knows what went on in Benghazi. The LaRouche organization had blown that thing open for several years now. So everybody knows what the truth is. One more voice saying the truth, really, does that make that big a difference? Or is she under the gun? Does somebody have?
No, it's more like a shot of resistance. It would. There's no guarantee, but if she were to do that, it would have a triggering effect.
Oh, yeah, it would help.
Right, it would help the situation. But the Republican investigative committee, the Joint Select Committee in the U.S. Congress, does not seem to be so interested in bringing down Obama. It's more interested in running an operation against Hillary, who they perceive as the most likely opponent in the elections. So, but it goes deeper than that. They intend to make an example of her. That they intend to make an example of her, and I believe it's my thinking, and she needs to come forward. If she does that publicly, says, I lied. This is what actually happened. That'll be the end of Obama. He might kill her as a result, but that'll be the end of Obama. And it's the publicity, it's the public act. Like, for instance, we've been campaigning to release the 28 pages from the 9/11 Commission report. They haven't been released. If they ever were released, the act of releasing them would be a devastating blow to the Saudis and to the 9/11 apparatus and to the Obama and Bush administrations, former Bush administrations. But until the actual documents are released, you haven't broken the power that you're dealing with, because they say the documents haven't been released. You can't tell me nobody can say what's in the document. The congressman can read the documents and say, well, I read the documents and we know what it said, but I can't tell you what it said. It's the same problem.
What do you think of the Iran deal?
Okay, that is an extremely complicated issue. So bear with me. Okay. There are forces in Europe and the United States that want to flip the situation by ending the sanctions on Iran. The pressure, especially from Europe and certain quarters in the United States, institutional quarters. And by getting the P5+1, and mind you, there are many more, it's no more than the US involved in the P5+1. And by ending the sanctions, the idea is you can bring stability to the region. You can bring Iran into you can clean up the mess in the Middle East. You can now work with Iran. And Iran is a country that everyone wants to work with for many reasons. Now, so the effort to keep Iran isolated is part of the whole imperial system, but the anti-imperial crowd is trying to change that. Now, they managed to create a situation where Obama would be too exposed if he did not go along. But Obama is counting on the Congress rejecting the agreement, the Republicans.
Yeah, but even if they reject it, the rest of the world is still going to deal with them.
Exactly.
So USA is going to be isolated.
Exactly. Exactly.
So USA is going to be the loser.
Exactly. And that, so this gets to another issue,
And realistically,
which is, and I'm going to go a little off on a tangent here. If you're a sane person in the Middle East and you're going along with the way things are, with the system that's been set up, at a certain point, you must, even if you're even a Saudi or someone in the Saudi government, you must know that this ISIS thing is going to grow, and that the whole place is going to become chaos.
all that comes out of Saudi Arabia.
Exactly. But even the Saudis are going to get eaten up by it.
But they already got the laws in
Huh?
They already got those laws in. It's basically a religious war. It's the Wasabis, what's the tribe?
Yeah. But what I'm saying to you is you have Putin and China very much involved in economic policies, trying to recruit Turkey, trying to recruit even the Saudis to a new geometry, to move out of the religious war geometry into a stable economic geometry. So there's this fight going on between these two geometries. And on the Iran deal, those who had commitment to the economic aspect got the upper hand temporarily in that particular situation. That's my view. So, but the closer it comes to flipping, I call it flipping, where essentially the U.S. is totally isolated. The U.S. is totally discredited. At that point, the Chinese, but especially the Russians, negotiate agreements between for the stability and for these projects to come in and so forth and so on. That's what's going on. Now, the U.S. could be part of that, but Obama and a lot of Americans say, well, let's be part of that, but the power around Obama, and Obama won't allow that. So that's the date. So in a certain sense, the P5+1 is a further incentive to go to war. Because I know it's a further incentive by certain forces to go to war because it also removes the excuse for the ABM system. So you have to play your hand. You see, so I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's good. I'm saying there is this power fight going on over how this whole region is going to function, and Europe, which is being inundated by all the people having to flee North Africa and the mess created by these issues, and the Middle East and Iraq and Syria and all these refugees, and then not to speak of all the refugees coming out of Ukraine, right? How are they going to deal with all that? Do they want to continue backing those policies? And so what Putin's strategy is to not get into a military condition, which will then seal the thing, but to leave it open for the shift. That's his approach. Whereas the British and the Obama administration are moving to create provocations to force the Russians to make a move. And this is what's been going on for some time. Actually, Putin is winning in a way, but the problem is that without removing Obama or without doing something to break Obama's ability to launch war, it's not a secure situation.
But isn't it Bill Clinton that started provocations of Russia by actually moving missiles closer to Europe?
No, it wasn't Bill Clinton.
Where he broke the deal,
That was Bush.
When the Berlin Wall came down?
That was Bush.
I heard it was
No, not really. No, it was Bush. It was Bush. It was the Bush administration. Clinton was actually involved in trying to work out. Clinton was actually trying to work something out with LaRouche with the Russians, and just before the Monica Lewinsky thing, a new architecture, and it was the
New financial.
new financial architecture. Yeah, Clinton was not under Clinton. You had the basic understanding on the Ukraine and so forth. And it was Clinton who ultimately stopped the, he didn't have full control over the administration, but no, he did not, he was not doing the setting up the ABM system. That came later. That came right after Bush came in. The ABM treaty was abrogated in 2002.
NATO closer to the.
Oh, yeah, but it's,
So antagonizing Russia is way back then.
yeah, but also Russia was, up until '98, Russia was being raped by the oligarchs.
Well, that's why he couldn't take control of the banks. They're still private, but he controlled them.
Yeah,
And that's another reason that they have to have war against Russia, because they're gonna put that banking system back into Russia.
well, it's not fully yet determined. He still has a fifth column, a Western financial fifth column inside Russia,
Yes, but he controlled it apparently.
to some degree. It's still a problem. He hasn't been able to.
Can we deal with it?
Not completely. Okay.
Paul, before the Iron Curtain came down, Russia was isolated, right? They said, that's a line here you cannot cross. So the Soviet Union collapsed, the line was gone. Now Obama says, we're going to have to build a new line, sanctions, no more dealing with the Russians. the sanctions have the same effect as the old Iron Curtain. They're an isolating line that cannot be crossed, so you have a pretext for war.
Okay,
Am I on the right track here?
partly, yes. Yes, the sanctions, the escalated sanctions, up to a point, are aimed at Russia, but they're also aimed at Europe. Because it's Europe which is doing the business, most of the business with Russia. And the Americans who are doing business with Russia don't seem to be having problems, the same problems. So essentially, the sanctions, the strategy that the British are operating under with Obama is a color revolution in Russia at the point that Putin is discredited in the eyes of the population, and which is a kind of a coup, and then bring Russia into the fold. That's one of their strategies. The other strategy is to get Russia to back down. Now, the problem is that if Putin were to back down, he would lose the support of the population, and that would open the door for also a color revolution. So it's that kind of situation. So they're putting the pressure on, and it's not really working. The media is saying it's working. The media is also saying that the Chinese are slowing down. Yeah, the Chinese economy is slowing down because Europe and the United States are not importing as much. But they're actually expanding their exports in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, and but not to Europe. And that's not why. So the Chinese economy is not collapsing as such. It's just not exporting. It is slowing down somewhat because it's not exporting to Europe and North America like it was before.
Put it this way, Canada would love to have the growth rate that China has.
Yes. So, but there's a lot going on that.
Can you go back to the political scrambling in the Middle East? Like you were saying that there were Saudi Wahhabis. Well, their ideology is based in extreme, what they call fundamentally Islamism. And how does that fit in with the ISIS, which they have the same ideology, going back to purity of religion? How Saudi is dealing with that? How that relate to Iran deal?
Okay.
Like where Saudi is right now?
Okay.
They hammer down.
Okay.
Yemen.
Okay. You have the ideology. This is what people. Okay, you have the ideology. Okay. Right. Okay. Now there's some reports that Wahhabi was influenced by the British in the 1700s. There's some people talk about that. Whether it's true or not, I don't know.
How about the Salafis?
Well, yeah, that's what we're talking about. So Salafi. Okay. Now,
They're together. They basically those two groups.
Now, this ideology, right, this fundamentalism, right, rejects any form of political institutions like elections, parliaments. Okay. It returns to the Caliph, meaning the authorized follower of Muhammad, whoever that might be. Now, Ataturk abolished the Caliph in Turkey. That's the basis of modern Turkey, is the abolishment of the Caliph. Now, when you claim that you're the Caliph, right, then the religious power in the Caliph, right, is the power, not just over Islam, but over the whole world. So the idea of setting up this Caliph is to deploy terrorist activities all over the world, ostensibly on behalf of this this religious belief. But where is the support coming from financially and materially and all that? It's coming from the West. Yes, it's also coming from the Saudis. But the Saudis are doing it with the West. Now, at what point does this, how does this thing work? It works on terror, right? That's how it works. And atrocities. Why does it work on atrocities? Because atrocities terrorize people. Fear. All right? So you're spreading this all over the world. Now the Saudis are part of it. But at what point do the corrupt royal families get eaten up by this monster? Because you're creating a monster. So it's a killer monster. The British monarchy, which wants to reduce the population to 1 billion, is looking at this caliph as waging terror from China through Russia, all over Europe, down into Africa, down into India, into Pakistan. This thing is non-stoppable. It is based upon what? A Dionysian frenzy of mass murder and a bestial rage, which is like a hurricane, which is like it takes over. It takes over, and it just takes over. It just kills, and it deploys, and you either submit to this or you die. That's the idea. But why is it being promoted by forces that have nothing to do with Islam? Because this is one of the instruments being used to destroy the development of the human race. Now, this has been done in the past. It's been done in the past.
It's the other one,
They actually took over whole vast areas in the Middle East, and then the Egyptian army pushed them back into Saudi Arabia.
What year are you talking about?
Oof. Don't ask me about year, but that's what I heard. I read that somewhere, that they actually expanded in the past to the Saudis, and
You might know more about that.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Okay, he was talking about. Go ahead.
the Saudis, they apparently took over whole vast areas of Middle East in the past, and it was the Egyptian army that pushed them back to Saudi Arabia.
That must have been the 1700s.
Probably.
Yeah. Or was it under Muhammad Ali?
Yeah.
Under Muhammad Ali, 1800s. Yeah.
He was, Muhammad Ali at that time, he was actually stopped the Wahhabis from spreading all over. It was a serious war between Egypt and the Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia. And the Wahhabis were defeated, and that was the end of it. But it kept simmering underground, and eventually it showed up later on with the Saudi family now. And
So you got to stop this thing before it builds up. Now, but this is what Obama is supporting. It's not the Saudis, just the Saudis. It's the Obama and the British are supporting this.
Yeah, they're using them.
They're using it.
They're using them. They're trying to use them to take out Assad.
Yes, and that's only the beginning.
But they're and also they're using them. ISIS is in this country. So, oh, we gotta go there because ISIS is there. So they're using them to attack any other country that they wish, because there's a couple of ISIS.
That's it. You got it. That's it. So that's what now. Do the people in the region know this? Yes. So the question is, how does the U.S. military say we have to stop ISIS? Yes. Is Obama stopping ISIS? No. DIA director has said this in 2011 or 2000. 12? Has anything been done? No. And so this is also the issue of removing Obama. This is also the issue of the 25th Amendment. So go ahead.
Yeah, because I'm in Sudan, so we're affected by Islamic extremists.
Yes, you are.
So I want to get the idea like the Saudi are in the camp together with the ISIS, but they want this Islamic extremists like ISIS to attack the peripheries, but they don't want them inside their own country. Is that what it is, or because they seem like Saudi sometimes like look at Yemen. The Saudi don't want the ISIS in Saudi Arabia itself, but they don't want, and Yemen doesn't want the ISIS either. Al Qaeda, ISIS, they don't want those guys.
But they're growing now in Yemen.
Yeah, they're growing now. So now Saudi is going bombing Yemen to let the ISIS grow over there, take over for them. So is ISIS actually in agreement with the Saudi? They know the ISIS know that, or they have their own agenda. People extremists like ISIS, they have their own agenda outside Saudi Arabia. Wahhabis.
I didn't communicate what I was saying properly. Let me try again. When you set something in motion like this, it's like setting Hitler in motion. Hitler was beloved of the European oligarchy. He represented their plan. He was loved by the royals of of United Kingdom. He was especially loved by Edward VIII. And you know, you've seen the picture of the Queen when she was what, 6 or 7 years old doing the Hitler salute, right? But when you put people like that into power, you set in motion a dynamic which can take a life of its own. This is the problem. You set this in motion. I'm reminded of the flagellants. The closest thing to this ISIS thing that I've known in European history is the flagellants. Do people know about the flagellants? The flagellants, they were, this is during the period of the collapse of Europe in the middle of the wars in the 1300s and the bubonic plague and all of this. And these armies of people who were doing penance by whipping themselves with things that draw blood from them, and they would chant, you know, and they would go into a community and they were doing penance to be able to
like Walker's Days or whatever they're called.
No. They were doing penance. This is like, these were nuts. They were stark raving nuts. They were psychotic. And they killed every Jew. They killed hundreds of thousands of Jews all over Europe as part of their penance. And they became so big of a problem that whole towns had to fight them off. It was one of the most brutal, ugliest things in Europe. But the flagellants were seized with a religious fervor. They weren't crusaders who were basically looters. They were something different. They were like gone totally stark raving mad. And the people who work for the people who get indoctrinated into ISIS and become part of ISIS, they live off the lust of the a lot of them are criminals and what have you, but they live off the lust of the actual. And the same thing with the right sector in Ukraine. It takes over, and it's not. I mean, it's in some ways it's worse than the Nazi SS or something like that. It's a bloodlust. It just takes over people, and they become insane. It's a Dionysian bloodlust. That.
So how do they, like inside Saudi Arabia, and like inside the country that supported this, say like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, like they support the idea of Islamic fundamentalists.
Right.
And these people go with the same ideology. Right,
but in the execution of the process, you set in motion a dynamic which is extremely disruptive.
So they don't want them to sell it.
They probably don't, but they are going to have to, like Hitler turned on his masters. at the in 30 and 30 and 30 39, 38, 39, 40 because you know.
Isn't it similar to Azov Battalion, now off the leash?
Yeah, but they're being you set in motion dark ages type things. Yeah.
I really think that this ISIS thing is not really meant to spread all over the Middle East. Islamic fundamentalism has been weakened seriously in Egypt.
Yes.
After the removal of Morsi. In 2012, when the Muslim Brotherhood took over the election in Egypt, it was really understandable because these people have been organizing for 80 years. And they were executed by successive governments, starting from last king to Nasser, to Sadat, to Mubarak. And then all of a sudden, the people really thought that those people are really good people. They are religious, they are clean, they are going to run a clean government and all of that. When they took power, all of this was exposed. It became really a dirty political power like any other political power. So when they were removed in 2013 by the army in Egypt, the population turns against them. Right now in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood is a dirty word. People don't like them anymore.
Right.
So they are weakened, and those are really the core of the whole Islamic political movement in the whole Arab world.
Right.
They are finished.
Now, I agree with you 100%. What was the ISIS is a totally different thing.
That's right. But the point is that still, though it's completely different, but it feels under the same general umbrella.
Yes.
The political Islam. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, it's not only political Islam which has been discredited by Muslim Brotherhood, you add to that the terror. That doesn't make them very popular.
No.
Okay? So as a result, and I think the Americans knew that, the reason is that they are being established to weaken the population in the Arab world from the east all the way to Morocco and the west. The general feeling against United States is very hostile. The Arabs don't like the United States for a very simple reason, because of support of Israel and what Israelis did to the Palestinians. This has gone deep, deep, deep in the other Arab world.
Right.
They hate the United States. Okay? And any person or any organization that can come up and present the policies that will be opposing the United States, it will become popular overnight. And you remember what happened, Nasser was one of those. Nasser became extremely popular, not only in Egypt, but across the whole Arab world, simply because he was opposing the United States and he was trying to fight Israel. Same situation right now. So what's really happening now that they are trying to weaken all of this such that Israel becomes the military, the real military and the only military power in the Middle East. In addition to weaken those countries along Russia and China, like Syria and Iraq, and they are succeeding in doing that. So the whole idea is really to cause havoc in the area, just cause havoc, so that the anti-American sentiments will not show up. It showed up during 2011 in Egypt. They attacked the American embassy, they burned the American flag, okay? They attacked the Israeli embassy. They actually went up and brought down the Israeli flag and raised up the Palestinian flag. All of this happened in 2011. Okay? This is what the Americans are really worried about in the Middle East.
Okay. Now here's what
But the whole thing is that the idea again is Russia and China. Again, this is really the basic thing. Russia and China is very, very important. The Middle East is very, very important for Russia and China. Syria is very, very important for Russia because it's the only place where the Russian fleet can get supplies in the Mediterranean.
Okay, I see what you're saying, but here's what I gotta say in response, okay? When the United States uses drones, it's increasing the hatred for the United States. What I'm trying to tell you is that the Obama administration is deliberately trying to increase the hatred of the United States in the region, because they're not run by the United States, they're run by the British. They're run by this British faction, right? The interest of the United States has been destroyed in the Middle East but that doesn't stop the process of instability in the region. But the situation now is that people are fed up with all this crap. They want an alternative. The BRICS are the alternative. And I see the whole area going with the BRICS. And they can try to use Israel to stop it, but I see the momentum beginning to move towards the BRICS on a mass scale in the Middle East.
Not quite. The only country that actually is approaching BRICS is Egypt.
I know, but Egypt is...
Syria, Iraq are not in no position to do anything.
Right.
So,
but the key battle is going to be over Turkey and over in Iran. You know, Iran.
Iran, yes.
Yes, but the key battle is over Turkey.
Yes.
And the key battle is going to be Turkey.
As long as Erdogan in power.
He's Muslim Brotherhood, right? Yeah, he's the last remaining. Yeah, he's the Muslim Brotherhood.
Going to be, do what the Americans say him to do.
I just want you to
So the movement toward the BRICS and the Middle East is not really that strong yet. This is a real thing.
But it's going to pick up.
It will pick up, but
can you take me further from how that affects Saudi Arabia currently now? Like Saudi Arabia bombing Yemen, and how is it related to Iran?
Saudi Arabia is an extremely weak country. Extremely weak.
So it's a kingdom that is about
They have
to be formed.
lots of money. There are two facts.
Okay.
The Saudi army is listed as number one in the world in terms of spending per soldier.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Number one. When it comes to military power, there are 50 countries. Saudi Arabia is not among them.
Okay.
Okay.
I see.
So the country is extremely weak, even though they have tremendous amount of money, but no power to protect it. So they are in a very, very strange situation. They will rely on the United States all the time. When Saudi Arabia was worried about Iraq, Saddam Hussein, he used the Americans, and the Americans went in, destroyed Iraq. Now they were worried about Syria. The Americans tried, but because of the Russian position, it didn't work. That's why the Saudis are going crazy about Syria. They are crazy about it. They wanted all the time, Assad has to go. Why in the heck?
Assad is connected to Iraq.
Assad has to go because Assad doesn't like the Saudis.
Yeah. Because this go to the Shia too, right? So
Probably.
it's kind of related to the Shia faction. So Syria and Iraq and Iran are connected to the enemy.
But this is not really the issue. The whole issue, as far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, is their insecurity. They're extremely insecure.
Same
They are
thing with Yemen.
extremely worried about any other military power that exists in the area because they cannot face it.
So what Egypt is telling Saudi Arabia right now? Is it coming down, like, we can work with together, or what is going on there with Egypt and Saudi Arabia?
I'm sorry, can you say that?
Egypt and Saudi Arabia.
And Saudi Arabia.
What's going on between Egypt and Saudi Arabia?
Egypt and Saudi Arabia is a very strange relationship now. And it's not really clear what's going on. But what happened is that the Saudis also, they are very insecure financially, militarily, but also they are very insecure religious-wise. They don't want to have any state that runs on religion to be successful, because that will affect on them. So the Muslim Brotherhood seems to be able to, they capture the population, and they became very popular for that year. The Saudis were very, very seriously worried. So they supported Sisi to get rid of the Muslim Brotherhood. They gave him a tremendous amount of money, billions of dollars.
Yeah.
So that established a strange dynamic between Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Now, when the war in Yemen came up, Egypt didn't participate.
Okay.
They actually sent 2 ships, 2 military
Yes,
ships,
yeah.
and that's it. They refused to participate in the air strikes. They refused to send soldiers. So the Saudis again got angry. But finally they realized that they cannot eliminate Egypt. So now they are trying to patch up the relations after the failure of the Yemen war. So
So
there is push and pull between Egypt and Saudi Arabia. I'm not sure how it's going to end up. That remains to be seen. We'll see what happens.
okay, see, Abu Dhabi, like Gulf countries supporting Egypt in development, the Gulf countries, not Saudi Arabia. The Gulf country. Is Saudi in it, or they don't want to support Egypt to develop, like the canal, the Suez Canal? Is Saudi Arabia into this financially or no?
Well, Saudi Arabia, the only thing that Saudis can do is to pay money. And the way to buy things by money, that's all. And it succeeds sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't. The situation with Pakistan, for example, was very interesting because the Prime Minister of Pakistan was actually sentenced to death during the Abdul Haq government. The Saudis actually are the ones who saved his life. And in spite of this, when the Saudis asked the Pakistanis to send the troops to Yemen, the Pakistan said no. So money
It doesn't work
doesn't
anymore.
work all the time. This is the point.
So it's
Okay, we're gonna have another presentation in a minute, but go ahead.
Paul, I wonder, because of your presentation there of the ISIS, what's Russia's position on ISIS?
What?
What's Russia's position on that? I'm sure they know that that's the old story from way back when the Ottoman Empire was against Russia. Yeah. They must know where the wind is blowing. What's their position on ISIS?
Well, the leadership, a lot of the leadership of ISIS is Chechens. So the whole issue of Chechens in Russia and is a very important part of the equation. But the Russians are not going to allow any of this crap near them. And they made that very clear. And they will not allow. But it's a very destabilizing process. And but it's not just ISIS. It's the U.S. getting involved militarily in skirmishes and war with the Russians. That's the main thing we have to be worried about right now. ISIS is part of that, but that's not the immediate situation. Is a military confrontation between the United States and Russia, and that's where it's heading very fast. And the reason for that military confrontation is that the financial power is going down, the imperial system is collapsing, and they have to stop the BRICS, and they can't do it without going to war with Russia.
Do you think that the USA can prevail if Russia and China unite and go against the United States in conventional warfare?
It won't. You cannot restrict it to conventional warfare.
No, I understand that, but if it'll start with that. And I don't think that USA can prevail against Russia and China combined.
That's what I'm saying. It won't. The escalation will be okay. What I didn't go through is the mentality of those who think they can win a nuclear war, which is not the military, but it's the number crunchers who have occupied the strategic positions like Ashton Carter is one. Yeah, and this whole crowd, neocon crowd, thinks that you can actually bluff your way, or you can go there.
So they figure they can stop all the Russian and Chinese missiles coming into USA? Is that what they're saying?
They're thinking that, yes.
Well, what about all the new missiles that China has and Russia has that corkscrew and twist and turn, and all your defense system is set up for the traditional directory missiles coming in?
They're thinking they could win.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, I know this is nuts, but they think that they can knock out the command centers in quick enough time to be able, and then stop the, there might be some bluffing involved too. Yeah, but I think they think they could win.
I'd like to go back to.
And also fifth column stuff too. Go ahead.
I'd like to go back to Iran, because John Kerry and Obama are saying that if the Iran deal doesn't go through, the dollar will collapse, the world currency, as world reserve. Do you know anything about that?
Who said that?
John Kerry said that. I watched him say.
When did he say that?
Just in the last couple of days.
That's interesting.
Well, everybody else is looking at you.
Well, that means they're trying to scare the Congress into passing it.
Why? Everybody said they don't want it. I'm confused. That's why I'm confused.
I think they're in a position where they have to have it at this point. They have to do it. It's like if they hadn't, okay. I know this is a very hard thing, and I could be wrong, but everything that the U.S. says it represents, it doesn't represent, and everything the U.S. says it doesn't represent, it represents. So at some point you get caught in that structure, and then you have to go along with something because of the consequences, and and they're telling the Congress, look, we made this deal. If we back out of this deal now, we will lose face and the dollar will collapse. But that's not necessarily the case. But they have to get the Congress to pass it at this point. Because if the Congress doesn't pass it, after all this going on and everything else like that, then the U.S. The U.S. loses face completely. So it actually ends up working in the opposite way. They got stuck on this, okay, as far as I'm concerned. So they're trying to protect, they're trying to save, they're trying to maintain face, but they have. I'm working this through as we speak. They're trying to maintain face at the same time that they're undermining everything. Obama's undermining. So the whole thing is very complicated because you don't have coherence in the policy coming out of the United States. You don't have a coherent policy at all.
Or is it possibly a convoluted thing where they're thinking that they'll pass it and then Iran will cheat and do they have?
No. It's a convoluted situation. It's a convoluted, it's a U.S. policy crisis because Obama's psychotic support for the stuff that he's been supporting is not the establishment consensus. It's not the establishment consensus. The establishment consensus, I'm not talking about Wall Street, I'm talking about the policy experts, I'm not talking about, is not to go to war with China and Russia.
Even Henry Kissinger said that.
But if it goes through in Iran, then you said that the Middle East will stabilize. How can they let that happen? That doesn't make sense.
That's the contradiction, right? You don't want it to be stable, but by reneging on the treaty, you create instability for yourself. It's a contradictory policy. It does not work. And in this instability, when Obama decides to go double up, like a gambler, double up to the next round, and the next round, he's got to be removed. But your question is it gets at the root of the contradictions in the process.
I think my take on Iran thing is the following. The United States knows that they cannot actually seriously hurt the nuclear program of Iran.
They don't have
Well, they do. They do. I mean, they have this centrifuge. They can, in a very short period of time, can reach high percentage of uranium if they want.
Right, they won't.
But the point, so the Americans knew that they cannot actually destroy that. So the military solution is not there. So the only solution is the political one. This is a contradiction that is really happening. That's why Obama wants this to pass, because if it doesn't pass, he will have to do some military action against Iran. That is not going to work.
But why, I don't see them needing to do that, even if Iran does get it.
That would make Obama the good guy then.
Iran wants to get the sanctions lifted so their economy can.
Right. But I don't see Iran being a problem from the standpoint of a military aggressive problem.
Because they can, of course, they can destroy quite a bit of Iran, but the nuclear program is deep underground. There was lots of talk about that 2 years ago. And the conclusion was, militarily, it is not going to destroy that.
But I don't think,
But
yeah.
even if Iran got 1 or 2 nukes going, I mean, how is that gonna match even what Israel has?
Yeah.
You know, so it's not to their benefit to even get nukes, because then.
But sure, yes, of course. That I'm not talking from the point of view of Iran. I'm talking about from the point of view of the United States.
Yeah.
I'm trying to explain the contradiction that's happening in the United States, because they found themselves in a situation. They created a situation where they have to get out of it, and that situation that Iran has capability to do nuclear weapons, which is not really true. So the Americans created that, and then they wanted to get out of it, and they couldn't get out of it. Militarily is not going to work. So the only solution is a political one.
In other words, the U.S. set themselves up. What you're saying is U.S. set themselves up, and okay, that's what he's saying. Okay, yeah, they set themselves up by making it an issue. There you go.
Exactly.
And they set themselves up. We got to stop it. We got to stop it. It's the biggest thing. It's the biggest problem. We're going to have ABM systems here to stop. And they made it an issue when it wasn't an issue, and now they have to back down. Okay, gotcha. All right.
The same situation. The same situation in Iran. Iraq was exactly the same thing.
Yeah. Huh?
Iraq was exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
They created this, again, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and they knew that there were none. But the difference is that Iraq could have been solved militarily.
Right.
Iran is not.
Around the can.
If I change the subject now, what's your take about the situation in China regarding the currency and the stock market?
And the explosions.
Okay, the explosion, I have not seen anybody saying there was sabotage. It was a petrochemical, plant. Those things are very dangerous. They've blown up in the United States, refining facilities. When they do, it's spectacular. And I guess China, I don't know if China has had anything like this happen to it before, but we've seen those things happen in the United States, in Louisiana.
It happens in the United States all the time.
Huh?
Actually, it happens in the United States all the time.
Yes.
Gas pipelines too,
Yeah, so this is another argument for nuclear power. It's another argument for nuclear power. Now, what is going on with the Chinese currency and the Chinese financial stuff is there are a number of financial bubbles that are being popped. There's a financial warfare going on, and there's a number of financial bubbles that are being popped. But the popping of these financial bubbles will not affect long-term the Chinese process. Now, the Chinese did a slight devaluation of the yuan, and I don't know the full reason why they did it. But I think it was part of a defensive measure against certain efforts to upvalue the yuan, to speculate on the yuan. So I don't know this precise things, but these are financial warfare situations which are developing now, And then then there's this huge thing about the loss of the economic slowdown, which is really related to the loss of exports to the United States and Europe because of the decline in the actual imports from those countries. So I don't think it's fundamental at this point, but there is a problem with China financially, and I'll go through that with you a little bit based upon and then I'm going to have Scott come in. Okay, the Chinese. Okay, this is my take on it. Okay, the Chinese do not want the whole global financial system to blow up and have total collapse. So what the Chinese are trying to do is set up Shanghai as the new financial center, okay, for the world, not just for China, okay. Now, they have all these development banks. Okay, the new development bank and all these other things, right? Now, and then they have the One Belt, One Road, right? You know, Maritime Road and One Belt. They have all these policies, and these policies are geared to development. Now, what they're trying to set up is a structure whereby dollar holders and euro holders and others, instead of taking their dollars and buying yuan and then buying dollars and buying yuan, they're trying to create a facility where they can channel the extra dollars or the extra euros into these projects, into the global development projects. But they don't have the facility set up to do that. So they're trying to set up these facilities. Now, if you're an investor in the United States and you have your life savings, you're not going to get much of a return. Standard return historically on an investment which is actually productive, that is one that is actually doing something productively in a growing physical economy, is somewhere on the order of 4%, 4 to 6%, 6% being the max, 4%. So this is what you should be, if you are in a sane economy that was growing physically and economically, you should be getting a 4% return on your investments, right? And over inflation, you should be getting at least 3% or something like that. That's not what you're getting. So essentially, you put your money with hedge funds, you put your money in mutual funds, you put your money in money markets, but those funds are not going really to develop, to the actual economy. So the Chinese are trying to create a conversion to convert the world into a system of development without causing the whole thing to collapse. It could collapse in part, but they don't want everything to collapse because of the instability that would occur. So they're trying, in my view, this is my view, they're not declaring war on the dollar or the euro. They're trying to set it up so that the dollars and the euros that exist can somehow be channeled into all these different projects and development projects and what have you. Now, if you're an investor and you figure this out, and this is actually what they're doing, then you're going to want to put your money in those things. You're going to want to buy the bonds for these kind of things, for a whole bunch of series of things. But you have to have a financial system that can do this. Now, you have investment banks and you have commercial banks. okay? Now, commercial banks are based on deposits. Okay, Alexander Hamilton pioneered the creation of commercial banks. Deposits are not investments. Your deposit in the bank is not property of the bank. It's your property being held by the bank and being pooled with other for loans. But it doesn't belong to the bank. If the bank can't pay you, then the bank is bankrupt. An investment bank is a whole nother thing. You put your money with the bank to invest, right? It's very different. If the investment, you're actually risking your funds with the bank. You are not supposed to be risking your funds if you put the money in deposit, because that's the difference. Now, what they've done is they've erased this barrier, so that they have turned all of the deposits into investments, essentially. So now, in China, they only now last year began to create national private commercial banks of this type. All they had before was state banks. Now, what was the problem with the state banks? Well, they charged too much interest rate. They didn't really function very well because they were connected to the political process, not to a financial process. The political process has to set the structure for the banks. But you can't bring the political process into the banks, because then you're going to corrupt the banking. You're going to corrupt the banks, and you're going to corrupt the political process, because you open the door for bribery and what have you. You have to have a certain independence between the private banking part and the regulatory and the government. The First and Second National Bank of the United States were chartered. They were chartered and separate from the government. You do not want to have the government be the bank, because there's too much temptation for political use of the bank. But you needed to have a regulatory structure for the bank, so it follows certain rules. But you want to not have that. You don't want political faction to determine the activity of the bank. Political faction should not determine economic issues, yes. So the Chinese are trying to create a private commercial banking system at this time inside China. But it is not liberalism. It has a different intention. It's not an intention of free market capitalism and in the way that we know it. It's an intention to create a more efficient system so that they can handle the volume of investments that they're going to need for this global development. Because they got a real problem of creating a structure to actually go with. Now, we all know that there's a fiber optic cable now being built to connect all these the BRICS countries, from Russia to China to India, underwater, all the way over to South Africa and Brazil, which will connect all the continents, so that they don't have to depend on the SWIFT system. And then they're setting up their own rating agency, so they don't have to depend on Western rating agencies. So all this stuff is being put together. An entirely new system is being put together. But it's not a system which is going to try to eliminate the dollar or the euro. Or if the euro collapses and other currencies come, it's not designed to do that. It's designed to actually, I believe they're setting it up to try to channel it into productive activity.
They're going to compete.
Huh?
They're going to compete with the International Monetary Fund, and they're going to compete with the existing system. So they're
going to replace. I would say replace, because there's no competition. There's no competition. It's two different intentions. All right, are we ready, Scott?
Okay.
Okay, let's go for it. So Scott's going to do something Go ahead.
All right. Okay.
I'll be right back.
Do you need help
I didn't-
bringing your computer in?
Yeah.
Oh, what Scott's gonna do, sorry. What Scott's gonna do is talk about how to end slavery. So, he's gonna talk about how to end slavery. Okay? All right.
Economic slavery.
Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah, put that up there. Yeah. Okay. Have I got some pens? Pull that to rush off, I guess. There. Anyway. Let's see what's up here. So, all right. All right. So, where did Paul leave off there? He's talking about the banking system and whatnot. And the theme he was getting at overall so far is the idea of slavery. And that the BRICS are the antithesis of this movement, of this history now, in the present time. And so we've all heard about what the BRICS are doing, you know, creating new central banks or new banks for development, and the AIIB and the BRICS Development Bank, and spending and investing their money into infrastructure all over the world, and especially the Asia Pacific region, and Africa, the third world. But it's not really understandable by most people, and even the informed layman, what, even financial advisors, political analysts, generally in the first world, what is actually going on, what it is that the BRICS are actually doing. And they can't make sense of it from their monetarist point of view. And Paul heard about it, at the conference we went to with Bo Chen, with, what was the British guy?
Jack Austin.
Jack Austin, saying, well, they're investing in this and that, but it's not going to pay them back any money. It's not worth it to do it, from that point of view. So, but that is because they don't understand what the BRICS are actually doing and what they're based on. And so so what they're doing is not just the continuation of the current system, it's a whole new system. So they're not just creating new financial banks and infrastructure, and they're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart or for good relations, although it will accomplish that, or for future trade markets in their country, which the IMF was created to do. But they are actually creating nothing less than a new world economy based on the scientific technical revolution that came about on the previous war to stop this development, that gave birth to the nuclear age that we now live in, marked by the nuclear detonations above Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but got diverted from coming into being with the premature death of FDR and the installation of a British imperial puppet into the White House, President Truman, to create the living nightmare of the Cold War, where the brightest minds were diverted into the military-industrial complex and the suppression of the science, the cutting edge of science, the new frontier of science, nuclear science, was subverted, and instead wars over petroleum resources and the rule of the British monetary system came into being and then fully developed with Nixon in 72 with the US petrodollar system. The significance of the new economy is as significant as the Industrial Revolution itself. And it'll transform the political economy and the human society worldwide. Things, you know, human geography, settlement patterns, where people live, locations, how people live, and many human, you know, conceptions of time and space and speed that we take for granted and is self-evident today in this paradigm. And other things, as you know, that will all change. And other concepts like valuation, what is value, economic value, and instead of just being about money. And so this new economy, and this is inconceivable to the man on the street right now, right? Because they have no real conception of what is economy, what is physical economy. And this has been lost, you know, and ironic that we live in it similarly, live in an era where everyone can drive a car, but they don't know how the car works. Or they use a computer and they don't know how the computer works, right? So this new economy is emerging from the BRICS deliberate transformation from what I would call the chemical era, which we still live in, have been entrapped by the British Empire, into the nuclear age. In a fully developed nuclear age, okay? And this is what we don't understand, and we don't know this. And we don't know this because of, you know, being in the Cold War. But this was the intention of Roosevelt and Kennedy, the full intention. And Roosevelt was collaborating with Stalin to unleash, you know, the powers of the industrial changes, significant things to create development worldwide. And then later by Eisenhower, who realized, you know, after Truman, that this military-industrial complex had really taken over, and that he created a program, Atoms for Peace. We have a great video about it on the LPAC site. However, President Kennedy's assassination ended this program and restored the Cold War balance of power under the deadly and insane doctrine of MAD, mutually assured destruction, you know, crafted by Bertrand Russell in 1946. So there's a deliberate attempt to keep this from happening. So why don't we know about nuclear development and why it's not the answer to our problems? Well, that's because most people don't understand the possibilities. They don't understand some of the possibilities because of the anti-science terror and the brainwashing and anti-nuclear scare tactics that have permeated the news media since the dropping of the atomic bombs in Japan, and the Russell-esque rather doctrine of Cold War, mutually assured destruction. So these were accomplished by the Pugwash conferences that Bertrand Russell organized, and then later after that, the ABM treaties negotiated by Kissinger in the post-57 period of Khrushchev. You know, and so this is what we've all led to believe, is that nuclear power and radiation are going to kill us, and they are to be feared more than, you know, chemical spills or all the environmental damage that staying in a petroleum economy has for us. And in so doing that, they have created a crisis, you know, because we naturally want to go to the next platform of technological innovation. And this is what the writer of the article that I'm talking about calls the Promethean quality, which comes from the play of Prometheus Bound by Aeschylus, you know, way back in ancient Greece, which, you know, he's the personification of humankind's struggle to evolve and their natural propensity to evolve, right? And Zeus is trying to keep mankind and, you know, confined, in which the play is really just about a parody of the ruling class and their mindset that they are the only ones, they are fit to rule, and so on. So with the transition to a nuclear age, mankind enters the autotrophic age and is no longer dependent on the energy resources based on living processes dependent on the sun, on the surface of our planet, and those below the earth, such as fossil fuels and mineral deposits, to emancipate mankind from its slavery in this respect. And this is what the oligarchy don't want. The transformation of mankind itself to be with and the earth on which the idle class of the petty seek to, you know, ensure their domination. So I wanted to go over and autotrophy is a term that was coined by Vladimir Vernadsky, who was a Ukrainian-Russian biogeochemist, and he was the first one. He studied life in general and came up with the first, I believe, no, not the first, but he studied life and he studied the idea of evolution, what creates life, properties of life, and he did it on a classification base. He did it on a large basis to try and make inroads into that far exceeded Darwin's approach, misguided approach, to find out what were the actual the principles of life evolving. So I want to go over a bit of the what is going to guide this new economy, and then give it shape and that will transform humanity itself. Oh, sorry, and I meant to explain the autotrophy. Okay, so autotrophy is defined to be, well, was discovered, there was, autotrophy refers to the process by which certain plants can actually produce the chemicals that they need to live themselves. So this occurs in chlorophyll, in the green matter in leaves, and there's these units called plastids, and they self-replicate, and they are able to produce the chemicals, and everything is a chemical that, well, that's what chemists would say, everything's a chemical, that they need to live. And so if they didn't have to be fed, plants would live independently. They don't need, all they need is sunlight. Now, there are organisms that are like that as well, that can produce their own energy from their environment. They don't need the sun. They don't need heat. They can produce it themselves. And they, for example, there's bacteria and fungi that do this, and they live off of, on the Titanic, for example, they have a picture of them transforming ferrous oxide into free energy, into oxygen, and thereby providing power, energy for themselves. So this notion that there are living organisms that can then live in inhospitable environments is the idea that maybe man is like that as well. Maybe man has that capability to live in inhospitable circumstances that only the mind of man can then create, you know, and change natural conditions to make it habitable. Okay, and it can be done not only from the outside and creating an environment, but also probably too, from what the research showed, is the science that could change our own biology to make that possible, which is the proposal for the isotopic science in medicine. Okay, so there's kind of they say there's four characteristics of an isotope economy that is on the horizon that the BRICS are trying to create. So what this means is incorporating one of the first is incorporating the entire open-ended array of individual species of atoms known as isotopes, which today about 3,000 are known, into commercial use as fully differentiated instruments of human activity. That would be for industrial processes and medical uses, and even probably in art as well, that would affect art. And the whole transformation of the notion of what we think is a fixed system of elements that we've been taught in school, the periodic table, is actually much more dynamic and much more bigger in scope than we realize. And we're just starting to realize that because of the nuclear science, creating heavy elements that are the product of nuclear reactions, like plutonium, right? There are elements that are created that even only exist fractions of seconds before they transfer into something else. Now, each of these, the idea of an isotope, then, probably should go over that, is that each element, you know, when the discovery, chemistry made the first inroads into the discovery of elements that we commonly know today, like carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, right? All of these things were discovered by the chemical analysis of natural matter. And they were broken down and done through mechanical means to separate them out and then figure out their properties. okay? And the conception of them was more or less like fixed ideas, and nothing different than, you know, a table or a book or anything that exists on its own. Mendeleev was a Russian chemist, and he was the first to make inroads in the discovery of new chemical elements. And he's actually, if I can find him here, another Russian, and he discovered that among the first elements, let me just read you, the building blocks of matter. In 1869, Mendeleev published his first version of the periodic table, demonstrating that the chemical elements constitute a single harmonically ordered organism, entirely as Kepler had seen the system of planetary orbits. Mendeleev's discovery of the periodic system was provoked by his work as a teacher. In teaching, he was irritated and provoked by the chaotic mass of data on the individual elements, and asked himself the question, what is it that we're really doing? Sorry, is what we're really doing here really a science? Can I present this as a science? Mendeleev wrote the following: the mere accumulation of facts, even an extremely extensive collection, does not constitute scientific method. It provokes neither a direction for further discoveries, nor does it even deserve the name of science in the higher sense of that word. The cathedral of science requires not only material, but a design, harmony, a design for the harmonic composition of parts to indicate the pathway by which the most fruitful new material might be generated. So he was the first to order what was already known, and then be able to, because of this idea of harmonic principle, harmonic ordering, be able to then predict that there were elements missing that weren't yet discovered. And this comes from a conception that these elements are the function of a higher order that creates them, right? That they're not just, they exist because they exist. And so the first, so the ordering principle. And so even though he did this, he said there was even more of that his discovery merely was the first step. In an 1870 article on the natural system of elements, he wrote, "When we succeed in discovering the exact laws for the periodic dependence of the properties of elements from their atomic weights, and for the atomic interrelations between the elements, then we will come near to understanding the true nature of the mutual differences between the elements. Then chemistry will be able to leave the hypothetical domain of the static conceptions, which have prevailed until today, behind it, and the possibility will open up to apply to chemistry the dynamical approach which has been so fruitfully employed for the investigation of most physical phenomena." Okay, so in addition to that, was also the discovery, based on that, was the discovery of X-rays and radiation. And this actually then led to more looking at the nucleus and what's going on, what is causing that radiation. And as opposed from chemical reactions, which are slowly starting to be codified and measured. You know, does two reactions, you know, produce heat? Do they take heat to produce? And measured quantitatively and all these kind of things. And actually that kind of science of heat started way back with Sadie Carnot and Leibniz, and during the, you know, the beginnings of, for refinements to the steam engine. But anyway, at the turn of the century was information like the discovery of radiation. And it was Madame Curie who later coined the term radioactivity, suggesting that the source of this radiation lay in the inherent dynamic activity of the atoms themselves. So she took it upon herself to study more of the materials and found that indeed it was coming. She studied thorium and uranium, and they were the next to last elements in the Mendeleev system, which means that there was, she conferred that it had to do with the complexity of the atoms. These are heavier atoms, and that then on the heavier ones, more easily found in the natural world, that there was from. So isotopes then are different versions, what we'd say if you were in a fixed system from what we traditionally know. Isotopes are variations of an element with different amount of protons and neutrons within the nucleus. That's our standard model now, today, still. So, for example, carbon, I think, and you see it here, gasoline, carbon it's got 6, is it 6? 6 and 6, right? It's got, and it's carbon 6. It's got 6 protons and 6 neutrons. Okay, and there's, I believe, carbon 7, carbon 8, carbon 9, carbon.
No.
No?
No.
Sorry, let me double check that. But there are about
All carbons have 6.
multiples of 6,
Yeah. Carbons have 6.
except carbon 13.
14.
There's carbon 13 too. Yeah.
No, the carbons.
Okay, so so there's 16 potential. So let's see, it's carbon 12, 13. We can obtain 16 different molecules having the same chemical structure, but different fine-tuned magnetic and other properties. If we include the long-lived isotope of C14, the number grows to 81. So this, and if we include that there are 5 hydrogen atoms in a molecule, in other words, 5 versions of hydrogen, then by choosing between ordinary hydrogen and a stable isotope, deuterium, up to 2,592 different molecules can result. So instead of just having, we know common water is H2O, well, what if we have H isotope an isotope deuterium and that's, all the permutations. You have, and there's still, the chemical properties are the same, but you have slightly different properties in the magnetic resonance of the compound, and this is that comes into play in terms of how the compound then reacts in how it reacts. So, and they're just starting to discover this in the research they've been doing in biological systems. So the 92 odd elements of Mendeleev's periodic table will be superseded by a much more complex and multifaceted system of isotopes, which we can produce and engineer for various applications. Right now, there's 1,000 or so longer-lived isotopes known today, but this number will grow as a means for extending the lifetimes and even suppressing the radioactivity of unstable nuclei and rendering them economically usable by binding them in suitable physical geometries. At the same time, the isotope economy will systematically expand the array of isotopes beyond those known today, deep into the range of super heavy, transuranic, new elements, and exotic isotopes of existing elements. So the potential exists to create chemicals and isotopes themselves. So how does that relate to what that relates to metal fabrication, to solid state physics, to chemical reactions, and life processes.
So the medical field would greatly benefit
Yeah.
from this.
Yeah. In fact, it'd be a revolution in and I'll get into that, but where now we have, I'm just going, so the second characteristic of this economy would be the isotopes themselves would become valuable in and of themselves. They're presently used mostly for ionizing radiation, as tracers and as tools of specialized scientific research. But in this whole process, the focus would be be on much larger scale applications by fine-tuning, what they call fine-tuning the subatomic processes, both in respect of to the inorganic domain, and in respect to the specific role of isotopes in the domain of living processes. Now, isotopes, one of the characteristics, you go over that, the differences is magnetic properties and atomic weight. Okay, so a C13 or 12 is lighter than a C13 or C14. Okay, in weight. So, for example, if you create a molecule that has a stable isotope that does the reacting, you can improve the function of that solution, of that chemical, for example. You could lower the threshold that chemical reaction takes place at. And this has been the case, for example, so I'm going to get into that. And this is the realm of, the next evolution of science itself. And these are so one of the first immediate significances of this is the differences in mass and the magnetic properties of the nuclei of the isotopes, which interact with each other in electron structures in their environment. And these are referred to as hyperfine reactions and nuclear magnetic resonance. And this can be compared, it says, to the principle of well tempering into the vocal polyphonic principle of music. We'll get into that unless you know more about music. But so for example, isotopically engineered materials synthesized from pure isotopes or selected combinations of them they have new collective physical properties that will begin to supplant the more primitive types of materials employed. Today we have materials that are made of a combination of elements that have different isotopes in them. For example, the one they cite here is that, what was it? It's a magnesium. I'm not gonna be able to find it now. Oh, here it is. Okay. Okay, so first it was recognized through the scientific chemical work, the work to try and identify isotopes and do all the work on them to label their mass and their that they discovered that some of them didn't have exact numbers in their atomic weight. And so why should this be? It seemed that some do have almost specific hydrogen is atomic weight 1. Tritium, helium is 3, almost dead on. Lithium is 6. Beryllium is 9. But then you had other, let's see now. Beryllium is 9. There's other elements like copper and oxygen and magnesium that didn't come up with a number exactly. It would be 23. Now magnesium's atomic weight varies between 24, 25, 26. And what they found was that this is what they call a half integral value for, so chlorine, lies in the circumstance that naturally occurring chlorine is composed of a mixture of 2 isotopes with 1 atomic weight, very nearly 35, and the other with atomic weight of about 37, in a ratio of approximately 3:1. So if you comparing the atomic weights of the isotopes with one another, instead of those of the elements, the large divergences from the whole number ratios disappeared, and a remarkable new set of relationships came into focus. So the relation of things. So in other words, in samples taken, there was a realization that it was a discrepancy between finding an integral atomic number for them, when for the theory, it would say that there should be a definite integral number for them. And what was discovered was not naturally, but was discovered that the natural sample was composed of a composition of isotopes. So the whole idea is that these can be isolated, and they can be made. You can make materials of a particular isotope, and you can make, and thereby doing that, have specific features to it. Its conductivity has particular features, and other properties have. And this then changes, and these are artificially created materials. They don't exist in nature as such. Magnesium as such will exist in a composition of isotopes. Right? Okay. So the other, so it says, it is conceivable that by altering and controlling the isotope composition of plant, animal, and human nutrition in certain ways, mankind could obtain a variety of beneficial effects, and that in the not too distant future, very large amounts.
You don't even have to go that far. You're using isotopes right now. The CANDU nuclear reactor would not exist if it wasn't for an isotope. It uses heavy water. Heavy water is heavy because it has one of the hydrogen parts of the water has an extra neutron attached. That makes it heavy, and it creates a totally different quality. The nuclear reactor that Canada pioneers, the CANDU reactor, would not operate with regular water. It needs this heavy water.
Yeah.
So the isotopes are already in use industrial on a very large scale.
You don't have to.
And only another way of we wouldn't know what the history of the climate of the planet would be if it wasn't for isotopes. We measured the ratio of heavy oxygen against normal oxygen, which varies with the evaporation rate of the oceans. And this way, by using the isotopes, we can go back 450 million years and determine what the temperature was in those times by analyzing sediments. So isotopes.
You're giving a better presentation than I am, I'll tell you that. Yeah, exactly. That isotopes are telling us information of how the Earth has changed and evolved. And we have carbon dating, which is measuring the ratio of carbon-12, or carbon-13, I think it is.
12 to 14.
14 to the ratio of carbon-12. Because we know the radioactive decay cycle of carbon-14. And so that tells us that's how carbon dating is done. And that, okay, so yeah, so it's already being used in the natural, in scientific study. The next evolution of it is creating isotopes, as we're doing for nuclear reactors, but in regular, commercial, not regular, but for industrial, deliberately using it in the economy for creating new materials and new processes that are unimagined, up till now. And you have to have a nuclear economy. You have to have nuclear science and nuclear research to evolve that science. and to make that happen.
It also gets us off of oil.
It does, yeah. It does. One of the, okay, and I'll mention that in just a minute. So an isotope economy or a nuclear-based economy will employ artificial transmutation on a large scale and generate, various species of atoms of raw materials for industrial production. And that is necessary for nuclear reactors, number one, coupled with as for fuel. But that coupled with with the reprocessing of all of the nuclear fission products, more and more the generators will be nuclear power plants will become atom generators and transmutation machines more and more.
They already have a breeder reactor for many years.
Right. Breeder
If I'm not
reactors.
mistaken, you wind up with a whole lot of other things,
Right.
many of which are very useful.
Very useful. Right. Exactly. You can actually, yeah. Right. Chernobyl was one of those, right? I think it was a breeder reactor. Chernobyl.
No, it was just a carbon,
No, it's power.
I heard
it
that.
was a carbon motivated, that's not a breeder.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So they wound up with a 1,200 ton charcoal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this, of course, causes all sorts of problems for all kinds of people.
So also, an isotope economy that the BRICS are going for is intrinsically astrophysical in nature and cultural orientation. So what that means is the development and maintenance of such a developing economy relies on going to from an Earth orbit and near Earth region, and requires the expansion of human activity throughout the inner region of the solar system to master subatomic processes for this type of economy on Earth. Because we must learn how these processes operate on the galactic scale of space-time, and we must come to know better than the present-day earthly speculations permit the prehistory of our own solar system and the origins of the elements we find in it today. And thus a network of space-based astronomical observatories in solar orbits able to carry out inter-infometric and related measurements of a galactic and extragalactic environment on the length scale comparable to that of Mars, the orbit of Mars, plus a greatly expanded program for the exploitation of the solar system itself. So that this economy will push us to actually go out into space, into new environments that will allow us to measure the bounds of and understand more in the process nuclear physics. How is it that the nucleus operates truly and as a unit? So one of the key things about a nuclear economy is that it is requisite, it is required for getting off of petrochemical based economy. And here's an example of it. Here's what I've written. Dr. Hussein talked about this in his presentation last year, in that hydrazine is a synthetic-made hydrogen-based fuel that will replace gasoline. And so The only problem, and hydrazine is used now to power shuttle craft, the space shuttle mission and other, space vehicles. And they only make it because, well, it's very reactive and it's very powerful. But it costs a lot of money right now to make because of the power, because we don't have a full nuclear economy. So if you lower the cost of energy through nuclear power development, you lower the cost of producing H2 gas, which is needed to then make a product like this. And as Dr. Hussein was telling me, that this cost right now is approximately double what it costs per liter of gas, but normally you actually make a solution in water of hydrazine in water, and that would in turn also have the cost of the price of of it as well. So that kind of thing is what is possible in a nuclear economy, and that's the only way really to stop. We're in a, to utilize, to get off of oil and gas for the regular economy.
So for energy, supplying energy.
The nuclear economy can also have a different way of looking at it. A hydrogen atom is made of one proton and with a swarm of one electron around it. The size of the resulting hydrogen atom is 100,000 times larger than the proton that it's made of, and the little electron, which is 1,000 times smaller than the proton again. That's 100,000-fold increase in product just by using energy to produce the hydrogen atom. If this principle, that is a very natural principle, the whole universe is made of that principle. If that is applied to economy as a goal for human economy, then we should be looking for 100,000-fold gain from economic activity instead of 4%.
Right.
100,000-fold gain.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
That's what we should be looking for. That's what the nuclear economy should inspire us to reach forward to.
Yes.
A whole new way of thinking of economic product gain instead of thinking of monetary gain.
Right. It would actually increase manyfold what we consider normal growth rates.
Yeah.
Right.
We should be looking at it. What can we create to make our life better? Instead of saying, how much does it cost? No, what can we do? And there's almost an infinite way of coming up with solutions of what we can do to make our life better.
Right. And here's for example, there's a couple two good examples is that we would, one is, for example, in semiconductors, isotopically pure structures of silicon, as well as carbon and a number of other elements, have found to possess a significantly higher thermal conductivity than the corresponding natural materials. A higher thermal conductivity accelerates the potential rate of heat removal from semiconductor chips, permitting them to operate at a higher power without overheating. A similar effect has been demonstrated in isotopically pure diamonds, opening up the possibility of increasing the productivity of various machining operations. It has been established that diamonds made of pure carbon-13 are significantly higher than diamonds composed of naturally occurring mixture of isotopes. So what more could you cut with a pure isotope a solid, a pure isotope for a diamond saw,
But it's already,
right?
it's already the hardest material.
Yeah.
So what's the need of going home?
Well,
More or less.
It's the hardest material that we know of. Maybe there's something in space that's even harder we have to work with. Maybe in being able to use that, we can use it for, we could actually use it in building material or other processes of creating a natural, an environment in which to live or to operate, right?
You don't even have to go that far. On a scale from 1 to 10, with diamond being 10, one element, diamond is very rare, but one step down to the rate of 9 comes to basalt. Basalt is 9/10 the hardness of diamond. And yet we have, what is it, millions of cubic kilometers of that stuff sitting on the ground unused.
Yeah.
So once we start using the material, the excellent materials that we already have, we can do a whole new industrial revolution. But we need the energy to melt the basalt to make use for them.
Right.
So it comes back down to the nuclear energy. You need nuclear power to make the processes work. And that's probably the reason why nuclear power has been squashed.
Yeah, we need, for example, we need nuclear power for high-speed rail and maglev trains and new innovations in transportation. Where are we going to get the power? We don't have that kind of power. We could try, we couldn't even build it and run it now if we wanted to, right? That's why China and Russia and Japan, and well, Japan is already nuclear, but I mean, that's why they can do these things. It's because they have a more fully developed network of nuclear power. Now, Japan is a very good example of that. They developed a lot of nuclear power. Now, mind you, they put some of these plants in suspect areas, but and there's other problems that around them that they didn't fully deal with, like the fact that Japan has 2 electrical systems. There's an electrical system in the north and there's one in the south. One that's pre-World War II, and then there's one that's post-World War II. And this is one of the complicating factors of the meltdown in Fukushima, because they had the plant wasn't able to hook up to power in either the north or the south, and thereby bring in, it was on a separate system on one of the 2 other systems, and it posed a problem in terms of getting electrical power to pump water through it. And they've just left it like that, not thinking that this is going to be a problem for them, and they've got nuclear power plants. That's a major oversight. And corruption involved, but it's because of that nuclear power development that they have the density to support their population and even the capacity to feed them. Have, well, not, I don't know if they're a net import of feed, but food. But
this was several years ago now, but they built this experimental watercraft, and it probably works better in salt water than it does in fresh. But what they, the process of magnetohydrodynamics, when generate power. So what they did was they reversed the process, and it was a twin engine with a catamaran, and the 2 motors were made by different manufacturers.
Mm-hmm. And at the time I was reading the report, the craft was capable of 8 knots. Mm-hmm.
Or at least that was the speed they got out of it. Maybe
Sorry, and what about the propulsion system? What?
It was basically you eliminate the propeller.
Oh, okay. okay.
So what you do is just magnetohydrodynamics in reverse. So you use electricity to power or to propel your craft.
Okay. Okay.
And so that's.
Okay, so, and you're saying, yeah, well, you gotta have
Well,
power to
we
do
were
that.
doing this years ago.
Huh?
So they were messing with this stuff years ago.
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, I hope they got more money because it's a very interesting trail.
yeah,
So you might not get a propulsion unit, but you might be able to make something else you had not previously thought of.
exactly. So, I'm gonna go ahead to,
These things get complicated beyond
Yeah.
imagination.
Scott, you were mentioning Fukushima
yeah,
accident. I saw some presentation on that, and in that presentation, all of a sudden, some higher officials from the London economics, from the banking sectors, they said, oh, no, we decide how this accident is going to be handled. I said, oh yes, now I know why we have this accident delayed, the recovery delayed. It was, that was owned in London, the darn thing.
right, and those were,
So once you get into financial interests, you forget about science.
right,
And so when you hear about nuclear accidents, don't forget the factor of who controls the show. That there are safer nuclear plants that can be built. They're far safer than any other power
Oh, yeah.
system.
yeah,
But once you get the
no,
financial system in there,
Yeah.
then you compromise
Yeah.
everything.
so I'm just gonna, one other example that, you know, in living systems that, that is interesting with isotopes. So, in the course of 2005, a research group in Russia, Russian Academy of Sciences demonstrated magnetic isotope effects of the biological synthesis of ATP, commonly known as the energy-carrying substance in almost all living cells. The decisive process of ATP synthesis depends on the activity of several enzymes that contain magnesium ions in specific locations. Now, it turns out that the rate of functioning of those enzymes changes dramatically when one magnesium isotope is replaced by another. And this is what they said in their paper. They said that the unusual effect was found for creatine kinase and ATP synthase. The rate of ATP production by enzymes in which the magnesium +2 ion has magnetic nucleus magnesium.
Scott,
Anyway,
we're running out of time here.
yeah, I missed on the last example.
Huh?
I was just on the last example. I was trying to read from that. The rate of ATP production by enzymes in which an ion of magnesium was shown to be 2 to 3 times higher than that induced by the same enzyme carrying a spinless non-magnetic nuclei. The discovery of this attention-catching effect convincingly demonstrates that enzymatic phosphorylation is an ion radical electron spin selective process in which the magnesium ion Mg2 manifests itself as a reagent. In other words, it acts faster. It makes a reaction. This is also true in another cell, another containing enzyme, PGK. So with the ion, with another ion, it had a 2.6 times higher rate with the magnesium 25 than with a non-magnetic isotope. And then, so the vast new view of biology and chemistry has opened up the point that a chemical with different magnetic characteristics of specific isotopes play a decisive role in how reactive they are. And so, although the recent demonstration, it showed isotope specificity, anyway, that goes into another debate. But in other words, a selective ion produced a higher rate of reaction, put simply. And so what if we can create a whole slew of custom-made molecules and understand what they do and understand and enhance even life processes and thereby and even possibly extend life, right? And all these possibilities. So that is a definite possibility. And this is a whole new realm of science that can only be opened up with nuclear development, nuclear science development. And for example, even within DNA molecule, for example, a segment of DNA molecule with 1 million carbon atoms has about 10,000 randomly distributed carbon atoms. The number is isotopically distinguished distributions. The number of possible placements of 10,000 atoms among 1 million sites is about 10 to the 24,000, far greater than the number of atoms in the universe. So the number of pure mutations of molecules and living molecules, then the permutations are enormous.
Virtually infinite.
Yeah, right. So
it's like you're doing something, which one do we want?
Yeah, right. And a lot of it has to do also with the reemergence of the structure. What they're saying is, we can clearly see from these studies, however, that it is a special physical geometrical environment created in living tissue that provides the context within infinitesimally small isotopic shifts, which in the non-living domain under normal circumstances would have only marginal, apparently merely statistical effects, can play a determining role in the course of macroscopic events. The unique character of living processes would thus reside not in some specific mechanism or structure, but in the power to generate and maintain such higher physical geometries, which Vernadsky identified in his work, but which is more adequately addressed by LaRouche's elaboration of the Riemann-Dirichlet principle. I'm gonna close it up there, but I hope I've given you a good, somewhat of an idea of the idea of what isotopes are, what role they can play, and what the evolution of the economy that the BRICS are going for is actually going to involve, and the next realm of that, and the potential of that. And we need to be a part of that for our own survival. And this is why the development of nuclear power and nuclear science that would make it a reality is necessary. Thank you. I did it.
Thank you.